Imagine a world where a loaf of bread costs $1 billion. What would that mean for you, for me, for everyone? How did we get here? Picture a country that once held the promise of prosperity, where industries flourished and the economy was robust. This was Zimbabwe, a nation rich in resources and potential. But today, the stark contrast is hard to ignore. The country that once thrived is now grappling with a catastrophic economic crisis. The local currency has lost its value to such an extent that a loaf of bread, a basic necessity, costs $1 billion. The majority of the population lives in abject poverty, deprived of even the most basic amenities. The culprit? Hyperinflation. A term that economists use to describe a situation where the prices of goods and services increase at an alarming rate, often exceeding 50% per month. It's a state of economic chaos where money virtually loses its worth, and living becomes a constant struggle. In most cases, hyperinflation is a result of an economic meltdown, where the government prints more money to pay off its debts. The increased money supply reduces the value of the currency, leading to a steep rise in prices. It's a vicious cycle that's hard to break, and the consequences can be devastating. But how does a country like Zimbabwe, once considered one of the most developed nations in Africa, find itself in the throes of hyperinflation? How does it go from being a beacon of economic promise to a state where billion-dollar loaves of bread are not a symbol of wealth, but a stark reminder of an economy in shambles? The answer lies in a series of economic decisions, political upheavals, and a lack of foresight that have led the country down a path of financial ruin. It's a complex web of factors that have contributed to the crisis, and understanding it requires a deep dive into the country's economic history. So how did Zimbabwe, once one of the most developed countries in Africa, end up in this situation? Zimbabwe's tale is one of rapid decline, from a prosperous nation to one where the value of its currency is almost nil. A few decades ago, Zimbabwe was a beacon of hope and prosperity in Africa. It was a nation that stood tall with a robust economy, producing a vast array of goods, from textiles to car parts. However, a series of economic missteps led to a drastic shift in the country's fortunes. Over-reliance on imports soon became the norm as local industries struggled to compete. This shift led to a significant decline in domestic production, resulting in a drastic increase in unemployment rates. By 2018, the unemployment rate had skyrocketed to a staggering 80%. As local industries collapsed and jobs became scarce, Zimbabwe's once vibrant economy began to crumble. The value of the local currency plummeted, rendering it almost worthless. The nation that once had a robust economy was now mired in poverty, with a significant portion of its population unable to afford basic necessities. The decline in production was not the only issue. Zimbabwe's economic downfall was further exacerbated by a lack of fiscal discipline and rampant corruption. The government's reckless spending and failure to curb corruption led to a severe budget deficit. This deficit, coupled with the decline in production and soaring unemployment rates, had a catastrophic effect on the value of the local currency. The situation was further compounded by the mass exodus of Zimbabweans seeking better opportunities abroad. With 1/3 of the population leaving their homeland, the country lost a significant portion of its skilled workforce, further crippling its economy. Zimbabwe's economic downfall is a stark reminder of the effects of economic mismanagement. It underscores the importance of maintaining a balance between imports and local production, and the need for fiscal discipline and transparency in government spending. From prosperity to poverty, Zimbabwe's story is a stark warning of the dangers of economic mismanagement. But what happens when inflation grows by 50% per month? Welcome to the world of hyperinflation. Hyperinflation. It's a term that sends chills down the spine of economists and citizens alike. It's a phenomenon that occurs when a country's inflation rate exceeds 50% per month. And no, that's not a yearly figure, it's every single month. Imagine the price of a loaf of bread doubling, then tripling, then quadrupling, all in the span of a few weeks. The local currency becomes virtually worthless. Pocket change becomes a fortune, and a fortune becomes pocket change. It's an economic twilight zone where the usual rules of money and value cease to apply. But how does a country end up in this dire situation? Well, it's typically the result of a state being forced into a corner. With their economy in free fall, they begin to take on debts, massive amounts of it. But here's the kicker. The money borrowed isn't used to stimulate the economy or improve social services. No, this money is used to simply cover the interest on their old debts. It's akin to using one credit card to pay off another, a precarious juggling act that can't go on indefinitely. The end result is a country drowning in debt with a local currency that's about as valuable as the paper it's printed on. So what's the solution? Well, usually countries can pull themselves out of the spiraling descent of hyperinflation relatively quickly, provided they take strong, decisive actions. This was the case for Germany in the 1920s, which managed to recover in just 5 years. However, if a state fails to implement the necessary measures, they could remain trapped in the throes of hyperinflation for decades. And if the policy isn't adjusted correctly, history could repeat itself, plunging the country back into economic chaos. This, sadly, has been the fate of Zimbabwe, a country stuck in a vicious cycle of hyperinflation for years. Hyperinflation is a vicious cycle, one that Zimbabwe has been stuck in for years. Hyperinflation is more than just about money, it's about the people and their struggle for survival. In the case of Zimbabwe, the aftermath of hyperinflation was a harsh reality that hit hard on every facet of life. The people of Zimbabwe bore the brunt of this economic turmoil. As the value of their currency dwindled to almost nothing, so too did their quality of life. The country's life expectancy, once comparable to that of many developed nations, plummeted drastically. Men who could expect to live to 60 found their expectancy cut down to 37. For women, it was even worse, dropping to 34. Hyperinflation didn't just affect the wallets of Zimbabweans, it also compromised their health. 1 in 4 people were infected with the AIDS virus, a figure made all the more tragic by the fact that the state was rendered powerless to help, as the healthcare system was also a casualty of the economic crisis. The cost of living became a cruel irony. Imagine the absurdity of a roll of toilet paper costing $100,000. The situation got so dire that it was more economical to use money instead of actual toilet paper. The economic hardship triggered a mass exodus, with 1/3 of the population leaving their homeland in search of better prospects. Unemployment soared to an astronomical 80%. The land that once thrived with industry and production was now a shadow of its former self. But the aftermath of hyperinflation was not just about numbers and economics, it was about the human struggle, the struggle for survival, for dignity, and for hope. It was about families torn apart, dreams shattered, and a generation robbed of its potential. The story of Zimbabwe is a stark reminder of the devastating power of hyperinflation. It shows us how an economic phenomenon can ripple through society, leaving a trail of devastation that goes far beyond financial loss. Hyperinflation in Zimbabwe has taken a heavy toll, not just on the economy, but on the people themselves. So, what can we learn from Zimbabwe's experience with hyperinflation? Zimbabwe's tale is a stark illustration of how economic mismanagement can lead to a devastating spiral of hyperinflation. The country, once considered one of the most developed on the continent, descended into catastrophic poverty in just a few years. This was a result of a complex interplay of factors, including severe economic mismanagement, a lack of fiscal discipline, and a failure to adapt to changing economic circumstances. The human impact of such a crisis is profound. Unemployment soared to 80%, forcing 1/3 of the population to leave their homeland. Basic amenities became unaffordable luxuries, with toilet paper costing $100,000. The average life expectancy plummeted, with men living to just 37 and women to 34. This is the real cost of hyperinflation, not just economic, but human too. The case of Zimbabwe also underscores the dangers of hyperinflation. When inflation hits 50% per month, a situation known as hyperinflation, it can lead to a vicious cycle. The state is forced to take on debts and spend its scarce resources not on social needs, but on servicing old debts. This is an untenable situation in the long run. However, Zimbabwe's story isn't just a tale of doom and gloom, it also serves as a reminder that recovery is possible, albeit challenging. Countries can and do emerge from the spiral of hyperinflation, but it requires tough measures and correct policy adjustments. It took Germany 5 years to recover from a similar situation in the 1920s. Zimbabwe's recovery, though, has been slower, indicating that the speed of recovery is largely dependent on the effectiveness of the measures taken. Zimbabwe's story is a sobering reminder of what can happen when the value of money becomes almost nothing. It's a lesson we would do well to remember.